summoning all of you to the fantastical world of Pokemon. Have you ever been curious about how the peculiar pocket monsters grow in numbers? In this marvelous video, we are going to talk about quite an interesting concept, the methods of Pokemon reproduction. Pokemon reproduction is a concept that has a lot of mystery surrounding its basic understanding. So let us discuss the questions around this intriguing phenomenon. There are various theories that exist in Pokemon lore about this concept. We wish to answer questions like, how do they reproduce? What goes into the mechanics of the game for this to work? What combinations of Pokemon work well together? What is the overall thought that goes into this process? Let's find out. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin.
Pikachu! Lila!
Do Pokemon indulge in biological conventional reproduction? Pokemon, which is short for Pocket Monsters, is a Japanese fantasy franchise created by Satoshi Tajiri and Ken Sugimori in 1995. Initially, Pokemon was launched as a series of video games, but soon expanded into an anime TV series as well as movies. The basic premise of this franchise lies in a world where humans and the Pocket Monsters exist together. The purpose of the games is to complete your Pokédex, explore the Pokemon world, and train a team of these curious monsters to engage them in battle. The Pokédex is an electronic device that is made to catalog and give information on all the different species of Pokemon. The TV series and movies engage their audiences with their riveting storytelling while also talking about things like family values, environment awareness, and dealings of life in general. Today's subject matter, however, is something that isn't talked about much. One potential reason for this points to the fact that most of the Pokemon media is made mostly for children. However, like most other species, Pokemon also need to reproduce to carry forward their genealogy. Pokemon reproduce through a process called Pokemon breeding. Breeding refers to a process of breeding two Pokemon to retrieve eggs from which a new Pokemon hatches. Breeding has existed since the second generation of the Gold and Silver editions of the Pokemon games. There are two rules that are necessary for successful breeding: the gender of the Pokemon and the egg group. Players can collect Pokemon eggs by bringing two Pokemons to the Pokemon daycare or nursery. The two potential parents must have matching egg groups. There are many factors that may influence the characteristics of the hatching Pokemon. This includes processes similar to selective parenting and the use of different items. Things such as nature, ability, individual strengths, and even the Pokeball can affect the nature of the hatching Pokemon. In some editions, like Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, breeding cannot take place in the Pokemon nursery. Talking about the actual process of Pokemon breeding, players must make sure, out of the pair of Pokemon which they wish to breed, one must be male and the other must be female. The species of the Pokemon is always inherited from the mother, and only male Pokemon can be used as conventional fathers. The ability to be bred successfully isn't restricted to belonging to the same species, but having said that, not every Pokemon is sexually compatible with every other one. Like we mentioned, both the parent Pokemon have to belong to the same egg group or share at least one egg group. This includes a Pokemon pair that share common characteristics and physiques. The hatching Pokemon will have traits inherited from both its parents. A male Pokemon can produce offspring that inherit the father's lineage by mating with Ditto. Ditto is a special case Pokemon that possesses the capability of breeding with every other Pokemon, regardless of egg group. In the Pokemon daycare or nursery, there must be two Pokemon, one male and one female, both from the same egg group. Their offspring is guaranteed to inherit individual values, abilities, and natures if the parents are holding specific items. In the games Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver, there exist Pokemon breeders. Players can leave two compatible Pokemon with them, and upon their return, they find an old woman holding an egg. She claims she doesn't know how the egg got there, but this could be a way to keep children from learning about the actual process of how Pokemon are made. Since Generation 3, players can find various possibilities regarding the compatibility of their pair of Pokemon. If the breeder says something along the lines of, "The two seem to get along very well," it means that the pair of Pokemon belong to the same species from different trainers originally. This also means that players can retrieve the egg with just a few steps. Other combinations of pairing different species from different trainers might yield varying results. Since the release of Pokemon Emerald, it is possible for the hatching Pokemon to inherit the nature of its parent. The abilities of a newly hatched Pokemon is related to its parent's abilities. Since Generation 6, fathers can also pass on their abilities to their Pokemon offspring, only if they are bred with Ditto. Another special case that exists in the lore is that of crossbreeding. And crossbreeding, a Pokemon hatches from an egg that does not belong to either parent's evolution. Exploring some other methods of Pokémon reproduction. While the lore tells us that Pokémon do reproduce to carry forward their lineage and grow in numbers, not all Pokémon are brought to life in this way. In the games, several Pokédex entries pointed to the evidence that Pokémon were brought into existence without sexual reproduction. This method is named as spontaneous generation, or even called spontaneous evolution. The necessary conditions for this need a pre-existing living being or non-living object. These either begin to mutate or are charged with energy that goes way beyond human awareness and understanding. The perfect example of this type of evolution would be Kadabra. The Pokédex entry related to him reads as, "It happened one morning. A boy with extrasensory powers awoke in bed, transformed into Kadabra." This can be found in Pokémon Fire Red, and it tells us about the possibility of humans seemingly transforming into Pokémon somehow. Kadabra is a psychic-type Pokémon. This transformation proves that humans can turn into Pokémon if the conditions allow it. However, this way of coming into existence isn't strictly limited to only psychic-type Pokémon. It is said that the souls of humans and other artifacts are imbued with life and the same incomprehensible energy we spoke about earlier. This results in the existence of the Ghost-type Pokémon. Various Pokédex entries claim that the Ghost-type Pokémon are the souls of humans who have died and are unable to pass on to the afterlife. Similar to spontaneous generation, many non-living objects were imbued with ghostly energy and were given a physical exterior, which resulted in the birth of the Ghost-type Pokémon. The Pokédex records mention that psychic and Ghost-type Pokémon also engage in sexual reproduction. They mate with their own kind and grow their populations. As we've spoken about, Pokémon breeding has always existed in the Pokémon franchise. In the original Pokémon animated series, we see Ash and Mystique join Brock, who is a gym leader. He held the ambition of becoming the world's best Pokémon breeder. In the series, Ash had Butterfree. Butterfree manages to attract a mate, a pink female Butterfree. Ash gives up Butterfree so it can start a family with a female Butterfree on a giant Pokémon breeding farm. It produced offspring by mating with the pink female Butterfree. A few examples of sexually compatible combinations would be a humanoid Pokémon such as Mr. Mime, which is capable of breeding with Magmortar. But Magmortar, which is a fire-type Pokémon, cannot breed with Rowlet, which is a flying-type Pokémon. In another instance, we cannot expect a Doduo, which is also a flying-type Pokémon, to mate with Nidoking, which is a ground Pokémon. There is a third method of Pokémon reproduction known as genderless asexual reproduction. There is also evidence of a few other types of Pokémon with anatomies that are able to stick to genderless asexual reproduction. Similar to our real world, plant-type Pokémon are fully capable of producing offspring on their own. Pokémon of unknown gender and those who do not have reproductive organs are also capable of bearing offspring through asexual reproduction. They must have some methods of perpetuating their own kind. As we mentioned, Ditto is compatible with every other Pokémon and can breed with anyone regardless of egg group. Ditto takes up the opposite sex in any pairing. It can also mimic any Pokémon down to all the organs. Also, Pokémon of unconfirmed gender can be paired with Ditto for mating. In this case, the gender of the child is unrelated to either parent. It can be said that Ditto was created for the purpose of being a universal breeding ground. Pokémon like Voltorb and Magnemite might not always be able to reproduce asexually. Ditto is capable of helping them carry out their lineage.
This is a nice little catch.
I don't know what these things are, but I can use them to practice my...
How do the genderless Pokémon breed? Many genderless Pokémon are genderless simply because of the fact that they are legendary Pokémon, but some just exist as regular genderless Pokémon like Magnemite and Carbink. Ditto is able to produce more numbers of these genderless Pokémon in the Pokémon daycare through a process of cloning. But most of these genderless Pokémon are found in the wild and somehow grow in numbers. The genderless Pokémon do not possess biological sexes, and sexual reproduction with one male and one female Pokémon is pretty much impossible. This is where two main methods of reproduction from the real world come in: parthenogenesis and asexual reproduction. These methods of reproduction are possible from just one single living organism. Parthenogenesis is a form of asexual reproduction wherein a female is able to give birth to or produce offspring without being fertilized. There are various ways in which this can occur, and in most cases, it involves the female duplicating the needed chromosomes inside her own body, as opposed to receiving the said chromosome from a male. This method wouldn't always work for genderless Pokémon, since the species that reproduce through parthenogenesis still have genders. But this might be how male Pokémon produce offspring without a female. On the other hand, asexual reproduction occurs when offspring arises from a single organism without any sexual reproduction occurring between two mates. In the real world, asexual reproduction happens in many ways, like budding or binary fission. However, the organism that reproduces asexually tends to be single-celled. Then how do genderless Pokémon reproduce asexually? Some plant-type Pokémon, such as Paris and Bellsprout have the ability to fertilize their own eggs or give birth to their offspring through stray twigs and roots. Not only can they fertilize their eggs, but they're also able to keep their eggs warm through built-in biological systems. The genes of the Pokemon offspring, which have been produced asexually, are completely identical to that of its parent. But all the Pokemon that players might encounter in the wild are all completely different, instead of being identical as one would expect. This evidence makes it tough to analyze genderless Pokemon which are found in the wild. Taking a look into the Pokemon daycare or nursery, however, we can see genderless Pokemon produce eggs by mating with Ditto. Though it isn't an example of asexual reproduction, the offspring produced have different individual values and natures, and in some cases, even different abilities than its parent. There remains a possibility that these differing values, abilities, and natures aren't all inherited traits. This clarifies some confusion about the genderless Pokemon that exist in the wild. The offspring of a genderless Pokemon can possess completely identical genes of its parent and also inherit all its traits. The differing traits can be attributed to those that are determined randomly at birth. It is not known for sure when the genderless Pokemon reproduce asexually in the wild, if they produce an offspring that is at a different stage of evolution. They might produce offspring which are at the same evolutionary stage as they are, since the offspring of a genderless Pokemon is genetically identical to its parent. As we mentioned in the beginning, Pokemon reproduction has a lot of theories surrounding its mechanics and functioning. Some say that the fact that Pokemon reproduce at all is an assumption. This can be considered since no one has really ever seen a Pokemon lay an egg. So did they just appear out of the blue? Conclusion. So there we go. All the possible methods of Pokemon reproduction, the process of which is quite a complex and intriguing one. Players find it to be a fun part of the game, figuring out all the possible combinations that might produce interesting species of offspring. The animated series never gave this concept too much thought, since it might have been too complex for children to understand fully. As they say, life always finds a way, even in the universe of our beloved pocket monsters. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.